Hallelujah. Wait, yes. Hallelujah. SPhR'd, Abba, yeah. That was so amazing, my father. That was so gracious, so full of all that is good. Abba, we praise thee and we thank thee for family, for life, for our Father, just for our breath. Thank you for allowing us to come together and to speak thy word, to explore thy love for us together. We praise thee and we thank thee. B'Hashem Yahushua. Amen.
Amen. So this is the letter MEM for Psalm 119. This happens to be June 15th, 2025. So a few things about the letter MEM. Frank Seekins, there's some different matters about MEM. It's basically MIM is the word water. MEM, Yod, MEM is the way it's spelled. Yod, MEM is just the word sea, S-E-A, like the body of water, the ocean, Mediterranean Sea. That's just Yom, Yod, MEM. Yom Suf would be Yod, MEM, Samik Vav Pei. Just Yod, MEM is the word for sea. So MEM is closely related to water. The Mayim is the word for water. Mayim Chayim. Yod Mem Im pronunciation is the plural suffix. So Chai, Chet Yod is life. Mayim would be water, plural, waters. And then if you say water of life or waters of lives, Mayim Chayim, that's just the way it's put together, the way the language is constructed. So in the Mishkan pattern, the letter Mem and Nun are a pair, a couple, just like Kaf and Lamed were a pair, just like Het, Tet, and Yod are a triplet. And then the interesting thing, this is like this code, is that Samik Ayin Pei are also a triplet, like Het, Tet, Yod were a triplet, but Het, Tet, and Yod are like one thing as a triplet, but Samik Ayin Pei are three separate things as a triplet. And again, it's a secret code. That's just the way it is. But we'll explain more about Samik Ayin Pei later, a couple weeks from now. But as far as the mem goes, lining up with the laver, the bronze laver, so again, going back to the Mishkan, you've got the big fence, and it's white linen, but then there was embroidered, at least on the gateway, blue, purple, and red, gold threads, so gold trimming, white linen. So whether the whole fence was white linen or as Andrew Hoy draws it, pictures it, the entire fence all the way around was blue, purple, red. Either way, the concept, blue, purple, red, colors of embroidery, white linen, gold thread, is typically the description. And I'm going to go over a few things every week, just people who might log in that haven't seen all the previous things. Please excuse the redundancy, but just to try to keep people up to speed, basically. So you had the big fence, and then it says right inside, around Exodus 25, right inside the fence is that where the fence bisects the area of the bronze altar, the barbecue grill. And then there's the tent, whereas Samik Ayin Pei and Zadi, halfway in between is this laver. So whether the barbecue grill was right at the fence, 2 feet in, 10 feet in, I mean, they're slaughtering animals. You'd think that the stuff would splash all over unless it was in a ways, 10 feet, 15 feet at the most, in my mind. Anyway, halfway between that and the tent itself is this bronze laver. And it's not that people came and drank from the laver. The priests could wash their hands. I had heard, whether or not this is true, somebody's speculation, somebody's study, was that they would put the laver over a spring of water. Does that mean you'd always have to locate a natural spring and then decide, okay, because there's a spring here, we'll put the laver there, and then we're going to set up the Mishkan? Or was it just a bowl of bronze on a bit of a pedestal, which every time you then use the water, you'd have to come and refresh it and fill it back up? And how much was it used? It wasn't used by the general public. It was used by the priests as they were working on the sacrifices outside there in the what's called the courtyard. Then the covered place inside had the menorah, the table of showbread, altar of incense. So that was a pretty clean interior space. You might say the dirty work was done outside, the barbecue grill and the laver. Well, the idea of a laver, a pool of water, well, if that's MEM, then you think of other things that are like this pool of water, which is a place where what would live in a pool of water? In a pond? Fish, frogs, turtles, maybe. The idea, though, that you have a place, an environment where something else lives, grows, and then jumps out. So MEM is the concept of a womb, that a baby is conceived and then gestates, incubates until it's ready to be birthed. Well, you could say that's the same thing as an egg, chicken egg, but also you could say, well, that's like the pouch of a kangaroo, where once it's born, it now harbors in this place until it grows and it can crawl back in. Or it's like, okay, so is MEM just necessarily water, or is MEM the place? Well, as I said, if you have MEM as a suffix, it's generally the plural. Yod-MEM is plural. Kaf-MEM means you, plural. Tav-MEM can mean them, or I've seen it translated as you. Lamed-MEM can also be them, or refer to a multiple of people. But MEM as a prefix can mean the place of, or the place that you came from, or the place that you used to be that you're not there any longer. So it means away from. Mem nun, if that's a prefix, it means beyond. Like not only that, but even more so. Not there anymore. That was in the past, and now it's beyond that and taking it further. So if mem as a prefix can mean the place of something or not something, how do you ever know which of the two it's referring to? Well, just look at the vowel points. Modern Hebrew, niks, nikud is what they're called. You could see a thing of it's NQD, nun kuf dalet, nikud, nun kuf vav dalet. But that means the dots and lines, the little marks that are put on the text, whether it's things above the letters, which are generally vowels, or pronunciation marks below, which are lines or dots. Or for cantering, singing, there's other little marks that go up there. Those are also could be called nikud. But the idea that in the Paleo, there's no nikud, there's no dots, there's no vowels, there's just the letters. So you might say, pronounce it however you want. And I've heard it said that nobody knows how even David would have actually spoken and said these words. But things change, locality, particular, you might say in the United States, somebody who lives in Boston is going to speak differently than somebody who lives in New York or Texas or Los Angeles. It's just different colloquial jargon, as it might be called. And that might be true with the Hebrew as well. But at least we have the spelling. And that pretty much remains constant. As I mentioned, I think it was last week, in the benefit of Klein's etymological dictionary is you'll look up Samic Dalit Kuf, I think was what the word, and then they said, well, that's was it Akkadian, a Syriac version of Zadi Dalit Kuf, and it's like, well, so certain letters can replace other letters. Is that official? Is that if a Zodi technically is pronounced as a TS or TZ, but you'll see, I've seen over time people referencing, well, it can be just an S, can be a TS, or can be an ST. It's like, well, which is it? There's a way to say it. And it's like, well, it just moves around. As people groups roam across the face of the earth, remember, if they were banished from Israel, they've sent to the far extremes of the earth. And so they're going to take with them tendencies to say things differently. Then when people start writing down what they hear, they're going to write it down differently. So, for example, you'll find the word kadosh most of the time written with a K, but it's the equivalent of the letter kuf, is the English letter appropriated to the kuf, kuf dalet shin or kuf dalet vav shin. So I always spell kadosh with a Q because that's the letter, really. Everybody, most people, spell it with a K, and it's just wrong as far as I'm concerned. Zodi didn't make it into the Greek, nor the Latin, nor the English alphabet, so TS, ST, TZ, maybe just a T, maybe just an S. And so some words have a summik, and it seems like it's related to the Zodi. And if you're just dealing with phonetics, maybe it doesn't matter. But if you're looking at what the letter means and how it's affecting the word, which affects the concept, which affects the sentence, the verse, and the way you see the universe is built, it makes all the difference, which is the nature of this study. So if I think of the MEM as water, the laver, a womb, an egg, a pond, but yet in looking at Yahushua's story about Aleph coming from the heavens to the universe, Bet, being the voyager, the ambassador, coming from one realm, one dimension of whatever the heavens are, and beyond our scope of reference, that's Aleph compared to in our Bet, in our tent, in our house of this universe, as if picture the universe itself is inside some eggshell. We don't know what's outside. So the Bet itself is a type of a mem, so's the Het, it's a type of enclosure. So if Yeshua simply is the guy who comes from Aleph into our Bet as Gimel, the voyager, through a door, a Dalet, but he claims to be the door, the Dalet, back to his father's house. So if you read the alphabet backwards, Yeshua being the door, anybody coming from the Hevav Zion, the other side of the letter Dalet, goes through the door back to Gimel Bet Aleph. So he came as this liaison, this linkage, this intermediary middleman, as it were, relay by which him coming from the Aleph zone into the Bet realm as the Gimeling Dalet through the Hey, well, the Hey is the feminine suffix. So the portal Dalet of the Hey, woman, means to be born of a woman. Could read it that way. Vav, well, that's the masculine suffix. Well, he's the man then. See if I'm reading each letter in sequence. He's the man who would be Zion, distinguished. Zion Hey means to identify, but Zion is also to be adorned with weapons, crown of thorns, robe of state, whipped, but also put to the weapon. It also Zion is the seventh letter. The word Shavah, 7, means to swear a vow or to be cursed because of not keeping the vow. And then Het, well, Het is an enclosure, like a pasture, like some kind of a fenced area. Could also be seen as a castle, could be seen as a prison, could be seen as a crypt. So if Yeshua is the one who was identified, distinguished, kadosh, made distinguishedly set apart from all others, exclusively the reference of the guy who would be put to the weapon, thrown into the tomb, and then Tet, something round. Well, that's a picture of the round rock rolled in front of the tomb, happened to be the Roman custom at the time, but Tet's also a full basket, so there's something that was filled up. Yod, is a hand that grabs, but it's also as a suffix starting with aleph. Aleph is a prefix letter, means I will. Yod means this is mine, or I do it myself, or I own this. So the first 10 letters could be read as this is what I'm doing. Kaf is a suffix, means you or yours, or here, like this is now yours. But kaf can be the prefix letter of another word that means like or as. Kaf is an open hand with fingers like a covering. It's a cupped hand holding something. If you put your hand this way, it's like these horizontal lines. It's like pictures of lines, furrows in a field, or lines of script, lines of the Torah. Lamed shepherd staff teach and learn, but the shepherd staff is also a picture of authority. If you think of the J-shaped letter, shepherd staff like that, a crook, shepherd's crook, one end is you could grab it and pull, the other end is the pokey end. You can provoke, poke, prod. So you could say, well, within the Lamed, teaching and learning something of compelling, impelling, provoking, encouraging. But the Kaf and Lamed, if that's the Torah instructions given to you as you're covering that you're supposed to teach and learn, that's like academic, that's scholastic, learn this stuff, information. Well, then what do you do with that information? Well, then that goes to the letter mem. Well, if mem is a pond, is water, if I see the kaf as lines of furrows in a field, that's where you plant seed. And Yeshua said, when he gave a parable of the sower, he said, well, the seed's the word of Elohim. Well, if the line is the furrow, the kaf lines is the furrow, where's the seed? Well, it's his word. What word? Now I have to go back, and in the book of Revelation, Yahusha is referred to as the one who is the word of Elohim. I think that's what, Revelation 19 or Revelation maybe 21. Anyway, that's his name. He's the word of Elohim. So you could say, taking the word into your heart, well, that's like asking Yeshua into your heart. Well, so it's metaphorical, but there's no place where it says to do that. I mean, that's what the church talks about, and not a bad idea, but I'm just saying that's where you could say it comes from. But if the lines of kaf or the furrow, Yahusha, or let's just say the word of Elohim is the seed that's planted in the furrow, the lamed, if you look at it this way, can be seen as a hoe, or that which works the soil to dig the trench, to drop the seed and cover the soil back over and tend. So lamed is tending, like a shepherd might tend the flock. Metaphorical analogies. And then what do? Well, you water it. So mem could be seen as watering the seed. But see, if mem is a womb, then that's within you. And like as a female gets pregnant, whether it's a human or animal, or she's taking the seed inside herself into her physical body. And then she tends it, pictures by the watering of it, tends it from her attitude and by what she eats and how she thinks, what she speaks, that all affects what's within her, helping it grow, develop, or even pick up its own, what'll become its own attributes. Well, if the seed that you take in is the word of Elohim, and the seed becomes the noon, which then gets birthed from the woman as an egg, as far as birds go, or a fish, or as a mammal, it's its own self. Well, that's the seed becoming an entity. What's that got to do with you? Well, you just tend it. Well, so this is where the analogy kind of has to shift and say, well, the entity that's birthed from the woman's womb is kind of half seed and half woman. That's the way DNA and genetics works. Well, if each individual is metaphorically the woman with the womb, See, gender is picture. It's not necessarily, well, which are you? Are you a male or female? Or it's a picture of how this all fits together. So then you could say, well, if you're the mother, the woman who has this womb, who has now this seed within her, yeah, but you're the seed. No, how did you suddenly become the seed? The the way I picture this is that if I take in the word of Elohim, the seed, then that seed, half of which comes from the Father, from Elohim, the other half comes from me, I become the seed. I become the noon growing within my own memness. And it grows and incubates and develops. And then as I, the mem, give birth to the noon, I'm that noon. Well, but what about me being the mem? Well, I picture an animal, let's say a dragonfly or a snake or some creature that as it grows, it sheds its skin and takes on a new thing, or a butterfly that goes into cocoon, caterpillar goes into cocoon, breaks out of the cocoon and becomes a butterfly. So the mem is in that case like the cocoon, which serves a temporary function and then it breaks away. And that which was growing and developing within it is the noon. Well, if you take the caterpillar turning into a butterfly, the same, let's call it the soul, the nephesh of the butterfly, the identity, the spirit of the butterfly, the particular being, self of that caterpillar made a cocoon, spun the cocoon, simply out of what it ingested, eating leaves and whatever it was. And then inside that cocoon, the scientists say that every cell turns into a slurry. So the leg of the caterpillar doesn't become the leg of the butterfly. The eyeball of the caterpillar doesn't become the eyeball of the butterfly. But every cell inside that cocoon turns into a soup. And then the whole thing redevelops into the body of the butterfly. So what might have been a cell that had been in the left hip of the caterpillar is now the antenna of the butterfly or something. I mean, they're just refigured. Well, the point is, if I can use this picture of myself, what happens to us when we die? How does this place work anyway? How did Elohim build not only the obvious, but the not so obvious that we have to tear things apart to look at? If you're scientists doing dissection or with machines, X-ray machines or scanners that we can look at electronically, the idea is, what if we're just looking at the letters? What's the story? So here we've gone all the way through Aleph, bumped into Mem Noon, and we're looking at this and saying, well, if I in my caterpillar self, like the Vav man, standard human, have to die. Well, we only have to die because Adam ate of the forbidden fruit. And it's like, that's what we're told. That's what the story is. And let's say that's true. But the concept of death had already been built. Elohim had already told Adam, the day you eat that fruit, you're going to die. Another place, he says, it's appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment. So you could say, well, it was only appointed after Adam ate of the fruit. And it's like, well, okay, whatever. We don't know the timing, but let's say it was. But the idea is it's still appointed. What does the word appoint mean? Well, there's a few different words that can mean appointed. One is Ayin Mem Dalet, which means this is just built in and established, the Amad. Well, anything built, established, instituted, that's the way it works. Kaf Nun, can, the word yes, truly, so that also can mean that. And so I'm just contemplating. I can sit here and say, well, what if this concept of death had already always existed since Elohim started making plans for the universe? Well, you look at the book of Revelation, and in chapter 19, there's a resurrection from the dead. This is the first resurrection. And then they live for 1,000 years, ruling and reigning with Mashiach. And it's like, where is that? Some other galaxy far away in another dimension? Is that here on the face of the earth? That's what it looks like it is. But you get people with different ideas because Yeshua said, hey, my kingdom's not of this world. And it's like, so I've heard people say, anybody who thinks that the 1,000-year reign, the kingdom of heaven is on the face of the earth is automatically out of bounds. He's wrong. He's a liar. He's an idiot. Don't listen to him. And it's like, nobody knows. I can read the words and I can pray and ask for understanding, but when you get everybody with a different opinion, nobody knows. We can believe certain things, but nobody knows. You can really believe that you're right and everybody else is wrong, but nobody really knows. I know people that have gone up into the heavens and seen things, and I knew a guy who said, hey, I know that the shape of the earth is that it's a globe. It's not a flat pancake under a dome hemisphere. It's like, well, how do you know that? I said, I know absolutely for sure. It's like, well, how do you know that? He says, because I went flying in the spirit one time, turned around and looked, and I saw it. It's like, okay, well, there you go. Is that true? Well, he said he did it. I'm not going to call him a liar, but is what he saw actually what they're, I don't know. And somebody told me once, it's like, quit saying you don't know, just ask. He said he'd lead us into all truth. So ask him to reveal the truth, take it and run. And it's like, that sounds like a great theory. And is that the way it works? I don't know. Be nice to believe that's the way it worked. I can expect that it works that way. But when I see the practical reality, I don't know that it works that way as we might simplify it and expect it to work. Some people may have that life experience. I don't. So I look, I read, I reason, I think, I ponder, I discuss it. I try to see the pictures that are in this thing, just so you know where I'm coming from. But going back to these letters, if I sit there and say, if I'm a standard human, caterpillar type, Vav man, who must die, regardless of whether it was because of Adam or what if Adam never ate of the fruit of the forbidden tree and knowledge of good and evil, and then Adam had a bunch of children with who, let's say there's 1 million people running around. Do you think somebody sometime is going to eat from that tree? Adam happened to be the guy who disobeyed, but if there's a million other people, you think somebody might eat it? And then there'd be another story, and then there'd be a group of people that didn't eat of the tree and a group that did eat of the tree, and those guys got to die. But it's like, I could make up all kinds of stories, what might have happened. But the question is, what role does death play in the scheme of things? Well, if Zion represents being put to the weapon, you got Zion meaning cut off. So Zion being adorned with weapons, but Zion also means to swear a vow or get cursed. But Zion is to cut off, and there's a package of a 7-day week as a model from Genesis 1, the first week of creation, 7-day. Actually, the 7th day is talked about in chapter 2, but the idea is the seven days as a unit, as a package. 7 means cut off, and so you can say, well, the 7th day itself is cut off, different than the other 6, but also this package of 7 is a limit. What does that mean? So some people say, well, that means there's going to be 7,000 years. So you got 6,000 years of normal life as we know it, and then there's a 1,000-year millennium extra. Different than the rest, and there's a total of 7,000 years. And then that's Revelation 21, 22, where the end of the world and get on to something else. New heaven, new earth. There's no sea, Yod-Mem. Yod-Mem, Yod-Mem would be seas, but yet Yod-Mem, Yod-Mem is translated days quite often, just so you know. There's a correlation between the word sea, S-E-A, and the word day, Yod-Vav-Mem. Yod-Mem, Yod-Vav-Mem. Im is typically days. What does day have to do with water? Another tangent. The point is, if you're put to the weapon at Zion and you're put into the grave at Het, that's the tomb, the sepulcher, the crypt, round rock rolled in front, and you're dead, you're really dead. Your hand is, something's holding you, or you're in the grip of death. Het tet yod. Well, what's Kaf and Lamed? In the grave. What's that got to do with the Torah? Well, go back and read the letters again. Yod Kaf Lamed, as a three-letter word, literally means Yod prefix, he will, and Kaf Lamed means all. So it means he will all. You look up the word in the dictionary, Yod Kaf Lamed means he will have the capacity to prevail, to contain it all. So Kaf Lamed is a measure of capacity, in which case all, every, each, any. If you see Kaf Lamed, it can mean any of those words. All, every, each, any. Kaf Lamed. Kaf Lamed Hey is the word for bride. So then you have Kaf Lamed Aleph, Kaf Lamed Vav, Kaf Lamed Vav Tav, Kaf Lamed Hey, Kaf Lamed Yod. You look at all these, what does it have to do with? There's a totality dealing with Kaf Lamedness. Well, if I'm reading it from the Aleph side and I'm saying, okay, this is the Vav man, the normal human being, Adam, is born subject to death. Well, then that's written into the letters. That's what I'm saying. It's not like, oops, Adam happened to eat it, and so he died, he brought death in, but now, so maybe the letters of the alphabet meant something different before Adam ate of that tree. Well, maybe it did, but we're looking at what it is, and so that's a whole nother conjecture of speculation. But just saying, what do these letters mean, and what do you do with them? Because Adam ate of the forbidden free, breaking the vow of, sure, Elohim, I'm a new guy in the face of the earth here, and I'll do whatever you say. Only, hey, that tree looks pretty good. The serpent bamboozled me, so I'm my wife, and so I'm going to eat it. And it's like, well, that's Adam being put to the weapon. Okay, but being put into the Het then is a picture of dying. Well, Het's dying? The Romans had this thing called the Elysian Fields. If the letter Het is this barricade in a pasture land inside, that's like going to some sort of nirvana, heaven, pasture, green pastures, whatever you might want to call that. Mythologically, different cultures have different ways of referencing it, but I can see that's inside the Het. There's this whole place. Yeah, but is that the end of it? Is that all of it? You live, you die, and then you're somewhere else? I mean, the letter Het is the eighth letter, shaped like a infinity sign. If you put the 8 horizontally, the letter 8 vertically, the Arabic numeral, drop it horizontal, looks like the infinity. So I can say, well, the letter Het represents what's going on for eternity. That's one way to regard it. Or you're dead forever. So if inside the Het is dead, or eternity, or the 8th millennium, or that's beyond the veil, Leolam, that we can't see, that we can't determine, but yet in this code, there's a bunch of letters there to determine. What are the letters? Inside the Het Tet Yod is Kaf Lamed, Mem Nun, and then another covered place. You got Samak Ayin Pei, and then an extremely covered, set apart Kadosh Kodashim place is the Zadi, where the Ark of the Covenant was. But that's not the end, because above the Ark of the Covenant, pillar of fire, pillar of smoke, letter Kuf, and then Reshin Tov. You got 3 more letters launching out into the, say, the by and by. Off the terrestrial Kuf is that which rises up and like the fire and smoke and takes you into the ethereal. What does these things mean? We're just trying to look at them and say, what do these things mean? But so we go back to say, well, there's 3 things, a code of 3 inside the Het. If Het Tet Yod were kind of like the entrance, then the 3 things are Kaf Lamed, Mem Nun, and Samak Ayin Pei Zadi. Stuff in the tent, collected as one. So I picture that as, hey, Yeshua said, 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, like metaphorical Kaf, like Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish. the belly of the fish. That's kind of in a MEM. And then he was barfed out, vomited, nooned. Kuf Aleph is actually the word to vomit, but Zadi Aleph is get out, is to publish. But noon, to noon out of the MEM is like being born or fish jumping out of the water. I'm saying you got to see all these little pictures, the different overlaps and overlays, and you might say this is confusing, but it's just how the story is built. Kaf Lamed talks about a totality. What's Mem Nun? And then you got Samik and Pei and Zadi. What's Mem Nun? Well, the word Mem Nun means to count. It also means that which is apportioned, your share, that which is counted to you. So when he says it's appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment, that's Mem Nun. That's man's destiny, assignment, lot. So when it's your time to die, it's not like, come on, what did I do to deserve this? You were walking the face of the earth. That's what you did. Yeah, but that's only because of the curse. What if we're Yahweh's people? We shouldn't have to die. Elijah didn't, and Enoch didn't. And it's like, okay, listen, there's spins on the story, and I know a bunch of people say that we should be able to be transfigured and not die and all these other things. And it's like, those are other conversations. But if I sit here and say, listen, we are Adam, we walk the earth, and then we die. That's the gig. That's the story of life on the face of the earth. And we're all going to have to do it. That's what he built into what this thing is. Well, if Yod Kaf Lamed means he will have the power and capacity to prevail and contain it all, what's he doing dying? No, wait a minute. That word, Yod Kaf Lamed, is inside the het, so contain it all has something to do with the death. If you drop the Yod off and look at Kaf Lamed Mem, and if you look in the dictionary, that means reproach and shame, a type of degradation. And I might think CLM, that's like CALM is the word calm, where everything stops, or calamity, where everything gets destroyed. And what's happening to the body, the physical body, if humans are composed of body, soul, and spirit, at least the spirit disappears into the back where it came from, to the Aleph zone somehow, but the mind disintegrates, vaporizes, becomes nothing, or nobody knows. People have got a lot of ideas, and some people have divine insights, but nevertheless, the body degrades, decomposes, loses its water, dries up, becomes mummified, turns back to dust. Well, then, what happened to Yahusha when he resurrected? See, I'm not going to jump into this other story because Yahusha is the great prototype. The great code is held in Yahusha's story. So he died, was put to the weapon, went into the tomb 3 days and 3 nights. And let's say he's decomposing because he's dead. He's losing water. His nephesh and his ruach disappeared, but his body, his basar, his flesh is still there, but now it's just withering. Well, see, if it withers, Yod Kaf, Het Tet Yod Kaf Lamed Mem, calamity, calm, reproach. If life is a glory, is an honor, is a beauty, then death is this shriveling disintegration. But noon jumps out of Mem. And after noon, if noon is like a sprout of a seed, Samik is a tree trunk and branches and leaves bearing ayin fruit, which is then eaten pei and flowering and blossoming, or the fruit opens up, depending on how you see pei. We'll get to that later. Zadi, then kuf. It's like, wait a minute. So between Mem and noon is a turnaround. That which disintegrates down at Mem turns around at noon's from the Mem. So just looking at the letters, I can see Mem is the lowest point. Well, Frank Sagan study, MEM is chaos. Like water is chaotic and turbulent. It's not at rest. Well, calm means nothing moving, and now you're saying it's chaotic, and it's like, which is it? It's both. Something is so destroyed, there's nothing happening, but the chaos is the disintegration. If the integration of the body was the assembly so that it functions, to disintegrate it is to remove the body, remove the spirit, remove the mind, remove the water, break apart parts, turn them all into loose molecules of atoms and electrons and protons, and now you've got everything back into the original dust, which is chaos instead of order. Again, we're just processing all these things to say, what's happening at MEM? What's MEM-ing? Like the ALEF-BEIT song, Yod, his hand who formed my hand, that's the creator, to hold on to his kaf, like hand in hand, interlaced fingers, us holding under the Torah, lamiding, teaching, learning, rehearsing, going over it, so that from mem, a blessed noon, restart. Well, if noon is restarting, then again, mem is the low point, and what is mem? It means from. So from the dead, from the place of death, can restart noon, a life. So noon is the letter that jumps. Noon is the letter that then speaks of life, even though chet yod, chai, or chet yod yod mem chaim is the word life. I can see that from death, if mem is the pond, the pool, the lather, that is a location that means from as a prefix or away from or beyond, I can see written into the text. And remember, this is the alphabetic sequence that was made before Adam was ever made, before there was ever 7 days of creation. This was that which was written in. So I can say that the concept of death existed before Adam ever ate of the fruit. That was planned as a destiny, but from the destiny, because of through. So now mem is like a portal, like a dalet, a portal from through which those who walk the earth and die comes another essence of vitality, of life, of vibrancy. Well, how does that work? Well, that's the question of however anything works. So then we can look back at the story and say, well, because of Adam, all are born into being subject to death. Well, yeah, but what if Adam didn't do that? Well, it's another hypothetical story, but he did do that. That's the story. So we're born into death. Okay, we're just born into death. That's what we got. But from the death, from that mem, and Yahusha then running this, what they call the virgin run, the prototype gamut, boom, 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 hit these letters, then turn around and boom, blew out the other side, Zodi resurrecting. There's a correlation between the Zodi and the noon. Sometimes the letters look identical, depending on how people draw them. A sprout, a seed with a sprout coming out of it, a tendril, like a seed which was dead, no life, sustaining for how many years. It's just a husk with a code inside of it, and then all of a sudden given earth around it and given temperature, sunlight, warmth, and water, it's designed to suddenly get a spark of life. And I mentioned before, I tried to look online and ask some people who are scientists, what is it that makes a seed regrow? Nobody knows. They just know that it does. You give it these factors. You take the seed, you put it in earth, you give it warmth from the sun and water. Is it warmth from what about heat lamp and not the sun? It has to do with electromagnetic radiation, water, earth. What's in the earth? Can you sprout a seed just in water? Every determination has an argument against it. I'm just saying, in general principle, the way this place is built is that a seed is not alive. There's no life in the seed, but it's got a code. And when that seed is put in the proper environment with three factors, earth, sun, and water, boom, it somehow comes to life. It takes on its own identity as a self, an aleph, and starts developing with its own body, bet, growing out, gimmeling, and then deciding where to go, which branches, does it decide or does the code just function? going back to Aleph-Bet Gimel Dalet Hey. But now we're inside doing Nun Samik Ayin. So Nun Samik Ayin Pei Zadi is a micro kind of an embellished detail of the same kind of picture, which was back at Aleph-Bet Gimel Dalet Hey Vav. So it's a retelling. So the first 7 letters are retold between Het and Zadi. Even though there's 11 letters, it's broken at 7. Het Tet Yod is 1. Kaf Lamed, Mem Nun, Samik Ayin Pei Zadi. But Samik Ayin Pei Zadi are a collection of 4, actually a collection of 3 with the 1 set apart. It's a secret code. Anyway, so you look at that and say, well, how do you know what the letters mean? Because YHUH did it. So YHUH ran this gamut. So you look back at that story of the gospel story and say, how do you know it really happened? Let me say this, whether or not it really happened almost doesn't matter. Somebody's going to probably try to crucify me for that sentence. But here's the thing. If you look at, let's say, esoteric hermetic knowledge, yeah, that's occult stuff. Yeah, there's more to it. But the thing is, there's a way of looking at, let's say, sacred stories that we know are real. We choose to believe they're real. They probably are real. They might be real. Maybe they're not real. But something is retained in the story so that you get, Kersey Graves wrote a book, 16 World's 16 Crucified Saviors. It's not just Jesus Christ. He was a rip-off copy of all these other stories. Why? Because it's the story which is sacred. Why? Well, it happens to pull from the Aleph-Bet. But that doesn't mean that I don't believe that Yeshua did those things. I'm saying that's why a lot of other people don't believe he did those things. But there's certainly retaining symbolic chronology in the story. And that seems to work. I could detail that later. But the point is this, saying, well, then how do I know what to believe? If the story's real, that's one measure. If the story's not real, but it's a sacred story, that's another measure. If it's all symbolic, metaphorical, and I can look into it and see all these philosophical, universal truths, that's a whole nother thing, regardless of whether the story's true. But see, why is that a significance? Because the universe was built a certain way by Elohim, by the Creator, and therefore, if he was following a certain pattern, well, the pattern is this alphabet. And so for Yeshua to come and say, I got to run this thing through. So he's at the Garden of Gethsemane, John 17. It's like, gosh darn it. Is there no other way? Is there a way I can avoid this stupid cross business? Nevertheless, not my will, but yours. Oh, gosh. So somehow in his humanity, the Vav men facing the Zion, he was contemplating, is there some way around this, that some loophole that, I can finagle and I got to go through this death. I got to get to MEM completely dead, not just kind of dead, in a coma, hallucinating, dead, totally and completely, Kaf Lamed, dead, MEM. Why? Because it's through that portal, that dalet of that MEM, noon happens. And he subjected himself to that, call it Edenic frailty of death, in order to initiate, to bring the life, to make sure it worked or to make it work. Nevertheless, he, Yahusha, subjected himself to run this progressive letter sequencing so that he could be the noon coming from that mem that would pay Zadi, Kuf, Resh, Shin, and Tav, the Aleph plan. And so when we did that video series, Why Did He Have to Die? I'm trying to explain this. It's like, how do you use the right word to tell somebody who doesn't want to believe it anyway? And if you do choose to believe it, how do you then wrap your mind around what are you looking at? I'm trying to elaborate this. And it's tied to what David was talking about, because once you see that, okay, this is a This is a pattern. This is a fractal model by which the entire universe is composed, going back to John 1:1. Then that means there's something in that tree, there's something in that bird, there's something in the cloud, there's something in the earth, this piece of metal, what makes up this paper. There's something about the way humans think, which is all about this pattern. And for Yeshua to come and die, subjected to the cross as the Vav man Zioning, and then thrown into the Het, besides all that, it's tied into everything else, which is going to project into eternity, which has to do with the way we think. Because it's the fractal model of everything. Unto infinity, because it was created before he created anything, 1 John 1:1. In the beginning, he created this word. And this word then became the one we call Yahusha. Other people call him JC, but then that distorts the identity, the thoughts, the fractal pattern. So I can't call him JC. I got to call him Yahusha, because that includes the fractal pattern, which goes back to the Mishkan pattern, which is locked in by the MUODYM, Leviticus 23. And so if you throw away the MUODYM, you've cut the string off the kite, and the wind is blowing the kite wherever, but it's not doing what it's supposed to do, being held by, you might say, Elohim, who's holding that string that the kite is tethered by. The MUODYM are critical and necessary. The MUODYM are part of the pattern. That's why he gave us the MUODYM. There's other reasons too, but the MUODYM are correlated to these same letters. Het, Tet, and Yod with Pesach, Passover. Kaf Lamed, Chag Matzot, Feast of Unleavened Bread. Mem Nun, Shavuot, 50 days of counting like a pregnancy. First day of conception, cut the sheaf, hold it up. The 50th day, birthing, waving up the 2 loaves. 50 days of a package. That's the way I'm seeing this, is that's Shavuot. And then in the fall, in the autumn, you've got Yom Teruah, place of the menorah, Yom Teruah, blowing of trumpets, Yom Kippur, the place of the table of showbread, Day of Atonement, Sukkot, the 7 days, the letter Pei, tabernacles, and then Shemini Atzeret, the last day, the Zadi, lining up with the Ark of the Covenant. Well, there's the pattern. And then Yahusha being crucified at the Zion and being resurrected at the Zadi locks in that with this 3 days and 3 nights, Kaf Lamed, Mem Nun, Samak and Pei, Zadi resurrects, brings about the possibility for Kus, Resh, Shin, Tav, because he went down to the Mem and nooned out of Mem. So what is it then that's so necessary? That's the way the place is built. Elohim built the necessary going through death. Remember, Yeshua even said something, another metaphor. He said, if a seed doesn't die, it remains alone by itself. It is itself. But there's a death to the seed. And if the seed dies, okay, so if you go take any flour, any piece of grain, and you break it off and a seed head, you'll see that it's green and tender. It's like there's life in it. But the seed has to die. It becomes dried out, nothing in it. And they can find seeds in some tomb that have been laying there for thousands of years. There's no life in the seed. It's just a husk, a hole with a DNA code in it. And then they put it in soil with water and sunlight, and that thing sprouts to life. He said, and if that seed then sprouts to life, it turns into a plant that bears other seed heads, corn as it's called, in which case there's a 30, 60, or 100-fold multiplication. But the multiplication is the word reshbet or reshbet in Hebrew. Rabbi, rababa, rababits. Multiply like rababits. Easy to remember, reshbet, RBB. Anyway, the point is, that's what's designed in the universe. That is this whole thing. You say, I don't like it. Why do we have to do that? It's like he's Elohim, the great wise one who built this place, and that's the way it works. So we all got to die. But through the death, thank you, YHUH, is that he made this other thing happen for those who choose life. So now he said, well, this isn't just for everybody. Oh, everybody has the option, but you have to personally choose life. That goes back to outside the fence. Havav Zion Het. What I'm saying is that there's all these doctrines of how does this thing work, and nobody knows. It's all a mystery. You've got these mystery schools of esoteric philosophies and religions, and it's like, how does anybody know? There's a guy named Hermes, Hermes, and that is something to do with Greek and Egyptian god mythology, philosophy, religion, science. And then you start looking at that on the internet, it breaks into all this stuff having to do with the occult and you might say witchcraft and Satanism and blah. It's like, well, how do people know these things? Because voices of disembodied ones come and tell people this is what it is, and they write it down, and then they become famous for the guy who wrote this down and perpetrates this knowledge. Well, that's just the same way Moses got download of insight from Yod-He and wrote it down and said, this is the way it works. But that means now I have to choose saying, well, who do I believe? Moshe? Do I believe what Paul say, the Apostle Paul or James and John or Peter said about Yeshua? Do I believe what Mr. Crowley or some other guys said about these other things? Who am I going to believe the way it works? I don't know, unless I have a personal experience, but am I going to believe that? How do I know what to believe? And I've known of people and I've read about people who said, hey, I had a disembodied entity appear ethereal or just speak, and I heard its voice and it told me this or that. So that's what I believe. Now, I can't deny that, but people have those experiences. That's a typical thing. I don't know what percentage of people, but it's a typical thing for people to have those experiences. Well, that's kind of like Eve in the garden encountering the Nakash, the serpent. What was his form? Did he look like a dinosaur, like a dragon? Did he have arms and legs and have to crawl on his belly like a snake the rest of his life after that episode? Was he somehow some sort of enchantment hologram looking ethereal? The word nachash is translated serpent, but it also means enchanting. Like, wow, it was shiny and shimmery, and we don't know. We just know the way it was translated. So how do any of us know anything? Or how do any of us know what to believe? What's Kaf Lamed? If I appropriate the value of Kaf Lamed to Yahweh's Torah, then MEM means have his seed, his word, planted in my heart, nurture it, and I will become, after I resurrect for the next life, going back to Revelation 19, 20, 21, I will become a blend of myself, the earth, Vav man, and Yahuwah, because it's his seed and his DNA in his word, which blends within me in this capacity of memness to become fit for, equipped for whatever's after this unto eternity. That's what. And if I believe that story, because that's what's written in this alphabet, I don't have to listen to any of the other explanations of esoteric, philosophical, spiritual descriptions, possible realities fostered by other, let's call them bodiless entities, like the Holy Spirit, a bodiless entity. So which angel am I going to believe? Which messenger am I going to believe? Every time I see the word Mem Lamed Aleph Kaf in the Bible, the scriptures, that's a messenger. There was a voice of a messenger coming through the burning bush, Exodus chapter 3, that Moshe had encountered, told him to go to Egypt. Who shall I say sent me? Oh, you're talking to a burning bush, are you? What you smoking? Well, the bush was smoking, and I just inhaled some of it. I mean, what was that going up? What gases were affecting his brain? He's having a conversation with the voice in the bush. Gosh, how do you prove any of this stuff true? Well, then when you read the Exodus story and you see the way the circumstances, events played out, and it's like, looked like somebody was telling him the truth. I mean, remember, he was told, you're going to come back and worship me on this mountain. You and all the people of Israel are going to evacuate Egypt and come to this mountain, and you're going to worship me here on this mountain. And Moshe says, yeah, give me a sign. Can you give me some kind of a sign that says, I'm not just hallucinating, but that's what's really going to happen? And the voice said to him, yeah, you're going to come back and stand here and worship me on this mountain. That's the sign. It's like, oh, the reality is the reality. When the reality becomes the reality, the prophecy becomes the reality manifest. That's the proof you're going to get. And it's like, yeah, can you give me something a little bit more than that to hold on to? Yeah, the fact I just told you, that's all you're going to get. And it's like, oh, gosh, come on, can't you make this any easier? See, that's the way we are designed. That's the way Adam thinks. That's the way Adam was designed. It's like, Yahweh said it. I can choose to believe it, but can you give me something to hang on to in the meantime? Well, he sent various Nevi'im prophets, and he sent YHUH, and we've got his word, and that's all we've got. Can you give me something else to hold on to? Maybe fly around the heavens a little bit or something. Can I have an hallucination? Can I have an out-of-body experience, please? Well, you can have that, but you think you're going to trust those? A bunch of people have those. Which one do you trust? We've got his words. See, this is what David keeps writing about in Psalm 119. He said, I've got what you gave me, which is your words, your commands. And one of the favorite words that he seems to use here is the pei kuf dalet. Interesting. I was looking in Revelation yesterday, and it says, those who keep your commands will get this eternal access to the New Jerusalem. And I looked at the word in Aramaic, and it was pei vav kuf dalet. And it was like, pei kuf dalet, those who keep your commands, but the word commands is mitzvot. And so here in the Aramaic, no, it's pei kuf dalet is command. Yeah, but commands is translated in the Stone Tanakh as precept. It's a precept. It's something you were given, you were entrusted with, you were appointed to be the custodian of this. It's also the word for a commander of a military unit. It's to be married and have a responsibility to tend, to be the guy, I could say the foreman of a crew or the guy running a fleet of ships or trucks. You're the one responsible for this stuff. That's pei kuf dalet. And when he comes and you stand in front of him on Judgment Day, or when he comes back or whatever it is, and you stand in front of him and say, tell me what you did. Let me see, what did you do with what I gave you? That's pei kuf dalet. It means to muster, to pass and review, to be held accountable, to say, this is what you gave me, this is what I did, and then you're held responsible for what's missing, what you gained. It's the same story as Yeshua talking about the guy that gave the talents and then came back. That's pei kuf dalet. So he gave us his commands. Yeah, but can you give me something else? I gave you commands. What commands? In week 1, he made Adam, and then he rested and said, okay, everybody's supposed to rest on the day because I rested, and that's my identity. So you get a different God. You're not going to rest on that day. But anybody who knows Yod Hey Vav Hey better know you're supposed to not work on the 7th day, because that's the first command. But the first thing Adam was told was, name the animals, be fruitful and multiply. tend the garden, rest on the Shabbat. I mean, those are the commands. Well, what are the commands? 613 laws. No, the New Testament is like 1,300 laws. What are we supposed to do? Mishpat and Tzedakah. Love your neighbor as yourself. Why? There's more to that, but what did he say? Mishpat, justice. Do the right thing. Don't rip people off. What's Tzedakah? Well, kindness, mercy, compassion. Be kind, helpful, regard the truth, and do what YHUH said. Don't work on the Sabbath day and regard as MUODYM. That's about everything that I can see. That's just about everything he said as a command right there. Everything else is a detail of those things. Honor your parents. Which capacity does that come in? It's kind of both. Honoring your parents, loving your neighbor, honoring Elohim, Abba in the heavens. Same concept. Well, how much of this stuff are we going to be held responsible? What exactly are the precepts we're going to be held responsible for? Why do we keep talking about the holidays, the festivals, and the Sabbath day? Because that's what it boils down to, as far as I can see. Don't work on the Sabbath day. Rest. Do something restful. Hey, does that mean you can jump in a canoe and paddle out on the river and float around on the lake? Some people say yes, some people say no. You got to figure that one out. Can you go for a drive? Some people say yes, some people say no. You got to figure that out. Rest on the Sabbath day, don't work. Yeah, but keep the MUODYM. Sabbath day is one of the MUODYM, Leviticus 23. Regard the MUODYM. He said keep these, honor these, guard these, watch these, do these throughout all your generations, forever. There's something about those MUODYM, which happen to be the great code keyed to the ALEF-BEIT, which are somehow a testimony of his identity, of his reign as king of the universe, creator of everything, somehow is locked up in the MUODYM. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, talk I did at Shavuot 2017, shores of Lake Erie in Ohio. Just as a reference, I believe was captured on video. I don't know if it got up on the website or not, but the point is, what if you could read the MUODYM as if they weren't festivals, but they were something else? Can you read Passover, unleavened bread, Shavuot, Day of Blowing Trumpets, Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, Sukkot for 7 days, and then Shemini Atzeret? What if you could read that as a secret code? What do you think it says? Think about that. What if you could read the Mishkan itself? Fence, barbecue grill, laver. Then now there's a tent, and there's a lamp, there's a table with some bread, there's a dish with incense, and then there's a set apart, exclusive, locked away in a vault, a golden treasure box. Can you read that as a secret code? What does it say? Can you read the alphabet as a secret code? What does it say? If there's a key, what is the pattern of the teeth on the key that opens the alphabet meaning? And somehow it had something to do with Yahusha coming here and going through the whole death, 3 days and 3 nights, resurrection thing. It's all the same. What does it say? Can you see it? And if you can't, why? Because he hid it. It was hidden and sealed. Daniel was told, hide the words and seal the book until the time of the QOOF-YOD, time of the end. End of what? End of the concealment? What is the code and how does it work? Did David see it? Daniel was 500 years after David. So if David saw it and Daniel was told to hide it, did David write about it? What did David write about at this MEM? And if David was writing about this stuff at the MEM, which we're going to look at here in the second hour. But what did David think that it did? What's the functional purpose? If Kaf and Lamed was, I'm going to learn your Torah, and if Mem has to do with, I'm going to take the seed of you, your communication, your identity, you, Abba Yahweh, Zavaot, part of you is going to become part of me. They say that when a woman gets the male semen inside of her, it goes into her and she takes on that DNA. It blends with her DNA. It'll even come out in her hair as being integral to the cellular structure of the hair. So if we read Yahuwah's words and take his words to heart, is that happening to us? Are we becoming, is part of him becoming part of us? Are we becoming him? Somehow we're changed. Somehow our DNA becomes changed just for taking in his Shin Mem Nun oil, Shemen. So the word Shemen is a synonym with Ayin Resh Kaf, synonym with Mem Nun, Shin Mem Nun, that which belongs to count, praise, evaluate. For us to ponder and consider what this is worth, for us to meditate on navigating his words is the process of becoming impregnated by him. That's why we keep talking about. That's why if you take the pen in your hand and write the letters on a paper and think and speak the words and contemplate the meanings and look in the dictionary, you are having that yada intimate relationship with Yahuwah. They didn't exactly tell me that in church. But from what all I can see of looking at the letters and looking at the words and reading the sentences and seeing how this whole language is built, it's what it looks like. Then you look at different words describing body parts, male and female. Zakar, masculine, seed planting. Yod, hey, vav, hey, hey, vav, hey. Why did he build it like that? Why did he call it that? Why does it look like that? Why does it work like that? Shem Zakar, Yod, hey, vav, hey. Coincidental? Why is the female, if you sit there and look at the design, it's built in. Well, that gets into the mystery schools. They're doing the same thing. They're looking at the fact that there's a fractal pattern, a fractal code to the universe, but they're not tying it back to Yahuwah and his Torah. See, the exclusivity of Israel is that Israel has Yahweh's voice, Yahweh's Torah, Yahweh's words. And they also have King of the Jews, Yahushua HaMashiach, though half of Israel, you might say, make up a gross number. Half, the Christians don't regard the Torah, the Jews don't regard the Mashiach. What's the reality? It's in this ALEF-BEIT. It's not a matter of being a Christian or a Jew. There's certain protocols of this we believe and this we don't in the priest class of both the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims, and I could throw in all the other Hindus and Buddhists and Taoists and whoever their other religions might be. But the point is, the core reality is locked into these letters, which is every word that Yahuwah ever spoke to his people Israel. And he said, only you, Israel, have I yadad, known, nun vav, dalet ayin tav, yod, nodati, nudati. I've made myself known to you. It's in these words. It's in these letters. Carla, where are we at on time for this hour? Hello? Seems like we're about a place to stop and get into what David said next. Hello?
Yes, Eric, let's take the break now. Thanks.
Okay, let's take a break right now, and then I'll come back with what David said, what he wrote.